Chapter 4, The Geography of Life. This chapter focuses mainly on biogeography, and Coyne talks about how different types of species are distributed around the world.
The study of geographic distribution includes that of both living organisms and fossils. Living organisms tell us about current active patterns that take place in our world. Fossils hold important information about what the patterns were like in the past. Fossils also allow us to piece fragments together and enable scientists to solve mysteries of past and current life. Biogeographic realms are large spatial regions within which ecosystems share broadly similar biological evolutionary history. There are also continental and oceanic species. Each species has a specific niche, either fundamental or realized. Fundamental niches are biotic and abiotic conditions that a species could use to maintain a stable population, which means that they have conditions that are suitable for existence without the influence of interspecific competition or predation from other species. Realized niches are the range of abiotic and biotic conditions that a species actually occupies.
Biogeographic realms. Alfred Russel Wallace was named the father of biogeography, since he figured that each region in each realm had similar biological evolution. Since then, he created the map of biogeographic realms. His map is still used today, mostly unchanged. Concurrently, the biogeographic realms are Nearctic, Neotropical, Ethiopian, Australian, Oriental, and Paleoarctic.
Darwin observed that oceanic islands lacked terrestrial mammals, and that endemic species on islands were most similar to species on the closest mainland. Furthermore, his hypothesis that endemic and oceanic species were the modified descendants of a colonizing species from the nearest continent. This also explained that the lack of amphibians and terrestrial mammals, simply based on the ability of these classes of life to disperse against large expanses of ocean. Furthermore, those that could disperse and colonize oceanic islands would experience modification in the new environment, and species unable to colonize these islands would never appear.
Initially, scientists went on search to prove Noah's Ark existed and to reinforce the concept of the Great Floor. They formulated the roots of biogeography since Noah's Ark crudely tried to explain the distribution of animals across planet Earth. According to Noah's Ark, since a pair of each species on Earth were taken on the Ark, all living animals should be descendants of the pair of animals initially. However, as research continued and increased amounts of fossil findings also increased, there was a realization of multitudes of issues. One, there are species that are found on continents but not on oceanic islands. However, there were species that were not native that were found in other geographic regions as well, indicating dispersal. The creationist idea formulated that species are immutable and static. Species that were immutable indicated that they will not change under any circumstance or condition. Furthermore, if these animals were supposedly static, that would leave no possibility of dispersal or migration.
There are two types of ecosystems that we must pay close attention to when analyzing biogeographic patterns. There are oceanic islands and continental islands. But for now, let's take a look at oceanic islands first. Oceanic islands arose from volcanic eruptions, which are cool. These islands are isolated from any nearby continent. Some species that are found on these islands can be endemic. Species that are endemic are only found in specific locations and areas. Some examples of oceanic islands include the three islands of Juan Fernandez, which Coyne uses, the Galapagos, and the Hawaiian Islands. It's important to know that non-native species that are found on oceanic islands today had ancestors that came from continental islands. This leads to one key characteristic to all oceanic islands that share: the lack of certain group of species.
As stated previously, oceanic islands lack certain groups of species. It's fascinating that they all lack the same group of species, which include native amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. Inhabitants that colonized these oceanic islands had to do it through long-distance dispersal. Early species of organisms on the island experienced unbalanced biotas because the habitats were empty and they lacked competitors or predators. As a result, radiation was common. No, not toxic radiation, but rather the compromising of many similar species. There are some negative consequences that native oceanic species experience. For one, they lack biodiversity. As a result, native species are not good with coexisting with others. Their ecosystems are also fragile and susceptible to foreign invaders, other organisms, and humans. Humans are usually the ones who introduce mammals into an oceanic island ecosystem.
Continental islands are islands that were once connected to continental landmasses. They were connected in the past and drifted apart by continental drift, or they were connected via land bridges. These land bridges are now submerged underwater and thus produce what is now known as vicariance.
Vicariance is a process by which the geographical range of an individual taxon or whole biota is split into discontinuous parts by the formation of a physical or biotic barrier to the gene flow or dispersal.
Species across continental islands. Some species across continents will look and behave similarly. A good example of this is placental and marsupial mammals. Marsupials are predominantly located in Australia, while placental mammals are located around the world. In the United States, there are species of squirrels referred to as flying squirrels. These flying squirrels are mammals and have an identical looking species of marsupials in Australia. These marsupial twins of the flying squirrels are referred to as sugar gliders. These sugar gliders and flying squirrels look nearly identical and behave similar as well, but they are not the same. Marsupials bear their young much earlier than placental mammals and care for them in a pouch on their abdomens until they are ready. Placental mammals have much more developed babies and have no pouch. The reason for such similarities across such a vast distance is due to convergent evolution. Marsupials and placental mammals do share a common ancestor. In the past, when the continents drifted apart from each other, their ancestors diverged among them. The vicariance of the continent splitting would lead to the speciation in which new species would form from the one population. These new species would be subject to natural selection based on their newfound ecosystem. Due to the similar selective pressures brought about by their similar ecosystems, some marsupial and placental mammals evolved very similarly despite being different species. Species that were in complete different ecosystems evolved completely different, which accounts for the diversity of the species.
Major geographical patterns are determined by the fossils that we find all around the world on continents and islands.
In the book, Why Evolution is True, Coyne uses marsupial fossils as an example to demonstrate these patterns. Marsupial fossils were first found in North America 80 million years ago, and then they were found in South America at the southern tip. Finally, they were found in Australia 10 million years ago. This created a dilemma since we did not understand how they got from South America to Australia. Scientists began to theorize as to how these fossils jumped from South America to Australia and looked back at the giant landmass we now know as Gondwana. They theorized that Antarctica would be the key, and they were right when they found fossils in Antarctica.
In conclusion, only evolution can explain the diversity of life on the continents and islands on Earth. Thank you for listening.